All right, so I am going to do this is another Ben Shapiro. He's interviewing Dr. Deborah. So the title of the video is "An Honest Conversation on Gender." Uh, One of the reasons that I'm doing this is because I expect this to not be an honest conversation on gender. I expect it to be another biased conversation on gender, and oh, this is how I live now. This is my old army undershirt. This was the what I wore underneath my BDUs in the army. Can you imagine me being in the army now with breasts like this? So hopefully that's not too distracting for you, but I'm probably gonna be sitting like this the entire time anyways. So maybe not. That's not very comfortable. But I don't know how important it is to be doing this. Maybe it is important. This could be a good opportunity. This could be another waste of time. I have done a few of these reaction videos and ended up just not uploading them because I felt like they were just a waste of time. But we'll give this a try, see how it goes.
Joining us on the line is Dr. Deborah. She's a sex neuroscientist, columnist, and political commentator. She has a brand new book out titled The End of Gender, Debunking the Myths About Sex and Identity in Our Society. It says very unsayable things in our modern moment. Dr. So, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start with what drove you to write this book in the first place? Obviously, one of the most contentious areas of American public life and apparently international public life is around the science surrounding gender. It has become basically unsayable to even suggest that men and women...
Now let me back up a second and say if I didn't say it already, because this is actually my second attempt to make this video. I had to get my lighting fixed, but I'm watching this because I know both of these people, and I've seen Deborah So at least once. I want to say I've seen her more than once, but I believe I've seen her at least once, and I believe it was on the Joe Rogan show. And what I recall was her being a little bit anti-trans, not in the sense of being hostile, but in the kind of the sense of like trans is not real kind of thing. That sort of thing. And of course Ben Shapiro is also anti-trans. He did make a video, I believe I reacted to that one too, called Debunking the Transgender Myth or something like that, or might have just been Trans Myth, but I think I never uploaded that one, but because some of these just seem to be like a waste of time. I feel like I don't know. I have not seen this video. I don't know entirely what it's about. But I do know both of these people, so we'll see how it goes.
Women exist as biological entities and are also different in a variety of ways, ranging from brain function to the biology of actual sex organs. So, what drove you to write this?
The biggest motivation for me was all of the questions that I've been receiving over the years ever since I first started writing about this issue, and that there is so much confusion. And what's really disturbing is that the information that is being purported to be scientifically accurate, the information that's actually being supported by some scientific organizations, medical organizations, even governmental policies, are not actually fact-based. They're not actually based in reality, or as you mentioned, biology, because for whatever reason, biology is seen as hateful nowadays. So I felt it was really important to offer a resource for people, especially for parents, because I would have a lot of parents reaching out to me saying that this is in their kids' education. And when I would try to find resources for them, I would see that a lot of what's available in the last, I would say 5, even 10 years, is ideologically motivated. And so I think it's really dangerous, especially to be teaching this to children who don't know any better.
So let's talk about some of the most controversial assertions by some of the, I would say, pseudo-biologists who are out there. How about the assertion that men and women are essentially social constructs? Even biology is a social construct. This is the most extreme form of the argument, that there are men with uteruses and women with vaginas. CNN the other day headlined that individuals with a cervix should make sure that they are cervically screened for cervical cancer. I have no idea what an individual with a cervix is other than a woman. So do biological men and women exist? And does the existence of intersex people invalidate the notion that there are, in fact, two separate sexes?
So it started off with gender as a social construct, which is not true, and then it's expanded to gender as a spectrum, and now it's expanded also to biological sex being both a spectrum and socially constructed, which is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, there are differences between men and women, and in terms of people for whom biology determines their gender, 99% of us, our biological sex will predict how we feel about our gender. So this does not invalidate intersex people. This does not invalidate transgender people. Intersex people, for the most part, do want to live within the gender and biological sex binary. Most of them do actually want to live as one gender or one sex or the other. And for trans people, obviously, it's just so happens that their gender is the opposite of their biological sex. But this is not to say that any of this is socially constructed.
So let's talk about the phrase that gender is a social construct. So that's been a very vaguely defined phrase, generally speaking.
Before they go any further, I kind of feel like it doesn't need to be pointed out, but I'm almost hesitant to point it out again because I believe every reaction video that I've done, I believe I've mentioned this, which is that I don't know who believes that biology is a social construct. I don't know who says that. I've never heard that. But typically, like, when you're referring to biological sex, you use the terms like male and female. When you're referring to gender, you use terms man and woman, because people do. I'm not going to say everybody does this, but if you're going to say that there is a difference between, like, the whole notion of being transgender, you might say is based on the idea that gender and sex are not the same thing, right? So just to put that in a simple way, that there's more to being a man than just having a penis, right? Or there's more to being a woman than just having a vagina. Now, when they're talking about like social construct, that would be things like men drive pickup trucks, men go hunting, things like that. That's more the social construct side of gender, but that's not, and also not, that does not encompass the whole notion of being trans, because a woman could go buy a pickup truck, a woman could go hunting, and does that make her a man? Not necessarily. So that's more the things that people are talking about when they talk about like the social construct, is what constitutes the idea of being like a real man, right? Because already in our society is the idea that there is more to being a man than just having a penis, which is why men have to prove their manhood, or you could say a male's manhood could be questioned. It could be called into question. People say, well, they're going to question your manhood if you drive a Honda Prius and you wear nail polish. People will question your manhood, which is to say that they may doubt whether you're a man or not. So that's more the social construct thing, and that's when people talk about gender, they're talking about that. Because gender, people may not realize this, gender and sex were not always synonymous. I hear people say that. Like, I watched a video the other day and this guy said, yeah, gender and sex were always meant the same thing. And I'm like, where did you get that idea from? Did you look at history, or is that just taken from your own life? You grew up thinking gender and sex were the same, and now you just apply that to the rest of the history too. Is that what happened? But gender and sex were not always the same. If you look at language, I just learned last week that English used to be a gendered language, just like French, Spanish, Italian, Latin. English had 3 genders in its language, just like German does, just like Latin did, which is to say that it had masculine, feminine, and neuter genders, meaning that when you spoke, when you use nouns and adjectives and things like that in English in the past, a long time ago, before the Vikings invaded England, because it was when they invaded England that they dropped gender from English because of the difficulties that apparently the native English and the invading Vikings, when they were talking to each other, that they had so much trouble that they just, because their languages were similar, they weren't the same language, but they were similar enough that they could have conversations. But the trying to keep track of the genders just got to be an obstacle, so they just dropped them. But anyways, nouns and adjectives had to have the gender case endings, just like they do in French, Spanish, and Latin. And it was not, if you put gender, assign gender to a bottle like this. If I say this bottle is masculine, this bottle doesn't actually have a penis. There's no biological parts here that we could say, well, this bottle is definitely a male. Now there might be things that in our physical world that we refer to as male and female, like pipe. I work for a pool company. I'm actually at work now, and we do use terms like male and female for pipe. Because when you're putting two pieces of pipe together, you'll often have what they call a bell end, which is you have two pieces of pipe where one increases in size so that it can fit inside another piece of pipe. So we use male and female to refer to that. You wouldn't call it a man and a woman, though. You're calling it male and female because of the kind of it matches what people mean by male and female when it comes to sex, because a male is what? Someone who has a penis. The penis penetrates the vagina. That's what we refer to as male and female. But is it masculine? Is pipe masculine? In Latin, liberty was feminine. Does liberty have a vagina? Anyways, I don't want to get too deep into that. I feel like I'm getting way off track already. And I'll just go ahead on.
There's this attempt to separate sex from gender, biological sex from gender being presumably the set of attributes that we typically assume to be more female or more male, that essentially you're talking about masculinity or femininity. So first of all, let's define gender, and then let's discuss what in gender is in fact a social construct and what is not, because the idea that masculinity and femininity are completely separable from biological sex is not supported by the science.
Right. So gender identity refers to how we feel with relation to our biological sex, so whether we feel masculine or feminine. And then gender expression is an extension of that, which is how we express our gender identity. So again, most people are gender typical. So if you're male, you're going to be masculine, and if you're female, you're going to be feminine. The second part of your question was referring to which aspects are socially constructed and which are biological. So again, it all comes down to biology and exposure to testosterone in the womb. So higher levels of exposure to testosterone are associated with more male typical interests and male gender expression. So this is regardless of what someone's biological sex is. So goes the same for females who may be gender atypical, who are more masculine, again, are more likely on average to be exposed to higher levels of testosterone in utero.
So when it comes to transgenderism, which apparently has become the real hot button here, if you say that men exist and women exist and a man cannot become a woman, nor can a woman become a man biologically, this is unsayable. If you say this sort of thing, then you put yourself in danger of being actually banned from Twitter. So can, in fact, a man become a woman or a woman?
I don't get his use of language here. I mean, who says that a man can become a woman biologically? Does anybody actually say that? And if they do, why is he even addressing that? Because that's certainly not the majority. Because I've been in transgender groups. I have never heard a trans person say that a man can become a woman biologically. I've never heard that. I have heard trans claim to be women and not. I did hear one trans person in my entire life say, "I'm not trans. I'm a woman. I've already made the transition. Therefore, I'm now a woman." But aside from that, I've never heard anybody say that a man can become a woman biologically. Using that phrase, I have biologically become a woman. Now, people do go through the transition. meaning they take hormones. They may even get sex reassignment surgery. But I don't know that they would then say, well, now I am biologically a woman. I think most people would say that they're trans, right? They're a trans woman, they didn't become a cis woman, I guess is a better way to put it. I don't know how else to yeah, I've never heard anybody say that they biologically became a woman. I have heard people talk about changing sex, like on their driver's license, which for me, I don't really agree with that. That is something that trans people do, because that, for me, the sex on the driver's license refers to your biology. It doesn't refer to your gender. Because that is why is that even on your driver's license to begin with? That could be maybe the gender is the important part there. Maybe that's the reason why that's on there, is so that if a police officer pulls you over and asks for your driver's license, and they look at your driver's license and it says F, but they're looking at someone who looks like me, they might say, well, this is obviously fake. Maybe that's why that's on there. I don't know. But I also imagine that if you were to get into an accident or something in a car and get sent to the hospital and something like that, the doctors might want to know your actual biological sex. I don't know if it's pertinent for a doctor in that kind of situation. As far as healthcare goes in general, I believe it is probably important for the doctor to know whether you were actually biologically male or biologically female, and I think it would be kind of stupid for someone who is transitioned, even though if they are living as a woman, to then proclaim, in all their aspects of their life that they are biologically female. I think that would be rather ridiculous, because it's not. That's not really, for me, that's not what it really means to be trans. I mean, that for me, if I were to say that if I transition, or if I have a surgery and my penis gets turned into a vagina and I've taken hormones and I have breasts, but if I get the surgery and then I say, well, now I'm biologically female, like, what is the point of that? What good does that do to say that I am biologically female? It does nobody any good, because it's not true. I don't have ovaries. I can't get pregnant like a woman. I can't do a lot of the things that I don't have a lot of the same bodily functions that women have. And I'm talking about biological females, right? So that's a little bit, I'm wondering why he uses that language. I feel like that's just, he's doing that intentionally because it sounds more, it's an easier thing to break down. It's an easier thing to bring down if he uses this term, biological, to become biologically the opposite sex. But I don't know anybody who actually says that. So,
woman become a man, biologically speaking? Or are we just talking about people who are suffering, when we talk about transgender people who are suffering from gender dysphoria, which is a legitimate mental condition?
Me personally, I have no issue referring to trans people using the pronouns they want. I will, if a trans woman would like me to consider her to be female, I will. But that is within the caveat of there are differences between someone who is born female and someone who is a transgender woman, and similarly for trans men and men who are born male. But the thing is, as you say, we can't even talk about these differences, and I think that's really harmful to society because, one, for trans rights, and I am in favor of transgender rights, I think for these communities, if they want to be taken seriously and to have their concerns heard, they can't be promoting narratives that are not based in fact and reality, because people are not going to take it seriously.
So in your book, you go through a series of myths, among them that gender is a social construct. So when you talk about gender identity or gender expression, so why isn't gender a social construct? Why isn't it completely separate from biology?
Well, I mean, basically, all the research literature shows that it is biological. We can look at a couple of different areas. So one area in particular is girls with a genetic condition called congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So they are exposed to higher than usual levels of testosterone in the womb. And when they are born, they gravitate toward male typical toys and male typical behavior, even when their parents give them more praise for playing with female typical toys. So this speaks to the fact that biology really is a very strong influence. And the idea that gender is socialized by parents and caregivers and teachers and the media and society or whatever else is just not true.
So let's talk about some of the differences, putting aside the transgender issue, just between.
I don't know. No, this is where I'm a little bit confused, because now I'm a little bit confused as to what they mean by gender as a social construct. Because, like I said in the beginning, my idea, there is more to gender than just, like, I have my own personal desires, that you would associate with gender, right? So, like, the whole idea of being trans basically means that your internal, your drives, your motivations, things that you're inclined towards, that these are more typical of someone who was born female, right? That's what it means. That's what I think of when she's talking about, like, gender identity, right? That is you might say biologically based. That comes from what? My brain. Where do my desires come from? That I agree with. I'm fine with that. But so my thing is, though, that as far as gender as a social construct, is if I had been born in a society where women wore pants and men wore skirts, what would I wear? Would I wear a skirt or would I wear pants as a trans person? Or if, let's say, if I lived in Africa and in a tribe where women wear these rings around their neck, would I also be wearing rings around my neck too? Or what would I be doing? Would I be dressing the way that I'm dressed now? That's more, when you talk about gender as a social construct, that's more the things that I think of. That aspect of, it's like wearing nail polish. Is nail polish something that is typically associated with something that women do? But let's say if I lived in a society where men wore nail polish also, what then would I do? Do you see what I'm saying? Where it's like what she's referring to as the gender expression. How do you express your gender without the social context, right? Like if I say that real men drive pickup trucks. I made this comment to my friend who lives in France because he was riding around town on his bicycle and was like filming it for me, letting me see the city that he lives in. And I pointed out to him that there are no pickup trucks. He kept driving by all these cars, and I said I don't see a single pickup truck anywhere. And I was pointing that out because where I'm at now, I'm actually at work in the shop, my family's business. And if you go outside, you would see a row of just pickup trucks that almost every guy who works here drives either a pickup truck or an SUV. And that's a social thing, right? That here where I live, to be a real man, you have to drive a pickup truck. If you people have criticized me because I drive a soccer mom van, and there was a lady I was talking to. She's like, "You need to buy a pickup truck." It's just because men don't drive soccer mom vans, but apparently in France, where my friend lives, that's people drive these little sissy cars and little minivans and things like that. I did not see a single pickup truck anywhere. I made the comment to my friend, the reason you're not married is that there's no real men in France. I don't see a pickup truck in here, which was a joke. But that's the idea that I'm getting towards, is that what do men do right? To express that they are a man. You know, apparently in France, men don't feel the need to buy a pickup truck to prove to everybody else that they're a man. And that's more the social construct thing. It's not, when they're talking about, she was talking about that girls who have been exposed to high levels of testosterone grew up to play with boys' toys, whether they receive praise from their parents or not. That's not what I think of when I think of as gender as a social construct, as far as the parents influencing their children. Like, I don't see gender as, well, if a parent raises their boy as a girl, that then that means the boy will be content with living as a girl. I think that the instances where that has happened, I believe, shows that's not the case, because there was I believe Ben Shapiro, in one of his other videos, made that point also, that there was an intersex, I believe he was intersex, or the child was intersex. I don't want to call him he, but the child was born intersex. I believe the doctor decided that they would did he do a surgery on the child? I can't remember, but the doctor decided that the child should be raised as a boy. The doctor was like, well, I'm just going to make a call here and say that this is a boy, I'm sorry, that it was a girl. And I think they actually cut off they had like something resembling a penis, and I think they removed it. I'm not sure about that part, but they basically raised the child as a girl, and then the child grew up and was like, yeah, something's not right here. And they eventually realized that they identified more with boys than with girls, and I think they ended up killing themselves. But that's kind of the thing. I mean, like, if that's the idea of gender as a social construct, then the whole notion of trans disproves that, right? Because otherwise there would not be gender identity dysphoria, right? Because if you say, well, if you can just raise a child as a boy and they'll be content living as a boy, that means the whole notion of trans is wrong, right? Because where did my dysphoria come from then? Why was it that I was so miserable for my entire life if I can just adopt the roles that society has put on me, these socially constructed roles that society has put on me? I mean, that's not what I would see as gender as a social construct, is what I have adopted for myself. I had adopted for myself socially constructed ideas of how I should act and how I should behave, but I couldn't be content that way. I couldn't live in peace that way. And that's, that what she just described there is in a certain way to kind of ignore what it means to be trans. Because if you're saying that gender can just be imposed upon somebody by society, then the whole notion of trans is false, because that basically just means that trans people are just basically just choosing to not adopt that. They're just saying, fuck society, I want to be a girl, so I'm just going to be a girl. The whole thing, it's almost like the saying that gender dysphoria is not real. As she proved, or as she stated, that the girls who are exposed to high levels of testosterone choose boys' toys despite persuasion to do the opposite, which is basically, in a way, proving the trans idea, not disproving it. I don't see how you can have both of those ideas together, that gender is a social construct, and that means that it can be imposed upon people basically against their will. Like I said, for me, that when I think of gender as a social construct, it means that the gender expression, not the gender identity, but the way you express your gender is a contextually based thing. That if you grew up in a society where girls wear earrings, and if you're a trans girl, you're going to wear earrings. That's basically what that means. That is your expression. That's how you signal to the world that you're. That's how you signal to the world your gender, because gender is something that people want to signal to the world, right? Like, why do men wear men's clothes? If society says, well, you're a man because you have a penis, then what's the point of a man wearing men's clothes? Is he not signaling to the world that I see myself as a man and that I want you to see me as a man too? But who determine what those clothes should be?
Between men and women more generally. So in your book, you talk about actual differences between men and women. What are the differences that we should, of course, we're speaking about on average, because there are people at the tail ends of sort of masculinity and femininity who may have some similar attributes, but when we're talking about the average man versus the average woman, what are the differences that we should take note of and that we should adjust for in sort of our social science analysis?
One area that I'm particularly concerned about is with how this plays out in dating and sex, especially for young people. They're receiving a lot of mixed messages from the media in terms of what to expect in their romantic relationships, how to go about dating. And especially for young women, I feel like they're being told a lot of nonsensical ideas, like they should behave like men in terms of their interactions with men, that they should enjoy casual sex as much as men. And I think, it's whatever floats your boat, I'm totally cool with. But if you feel the pressure to behave in a way that is not comfortable for you or that you don't actually enjoy, I feel like young people are just so confused and there's so much misinformation. And I know that you often will give advice to your listeners, so I definitely think that fact-based information is the way to go, especially dating is difficult enough as is.
So let's talk for a second about some of the myths that have been put out there in the social sciences with regard to basically by ignoring differences between men and women. You can come up with these bizarre statistics suggesting that women are wildly discriminated against in American society. Here I'm thinking mostly about the wage gap and the suggestion that because men and women have pretty significantly different preferences in terms of the kind of jobs they like and the number of hours they want to work, that this is just a reflection of society's bias against females. Do you talk in the book, The End of Gender, Debunking the Myths About Sex and Identity in Our Society, about the differences between men and women in terms of some of the choices that they make about family and about career and how this actually impacts things like average income?
I do, to the extent of women on average preferring to have a work-life balance, and that the fact that we're not actually having this conversation in a very honest way, and that we're blaming any sort of discrepancy or difference we see in terms of the sex ratio on sexism, I think is actually hurting women because it's not helping them make informed decisions that are actually going to help them live more meaningful and content lives. So one area that I do write and speak quite often about is the sex ratio in STEM and the fact that it is not a 50-50 ratio. However, it is not due to sexism. Again, it's due to occupational differences on averages, which again go back to, on average, exposure to prenatal testosterone in terms of what we find interesting. And I think it's really patronizing and infantilizing to say that women who choose to pursue different priorities in their life from men are somehow oppressed.
So, Dr. So, you obviously are not somebody who would consider herself, I think, on the conservative side of the political aisle. I mean, you used to write for Playboy. You're not somebody who would fall comfortably into like the center of the Republican Party, and yet you've sort of been treated that way by a huge swath of the media, certainly the Twitterati. People for saying some of these basic truths. You've been treated as sort of a social outcast in many ways. Can you talk a little bit about the reaction and why it is that the radical left seems to have taken so much control in areas of science?
Yeah.
I miss something there. How they kind of went from the trans thing to gender equality. I realize this is meant to be a talk on gender, but I didn't quite catch that. How that what exactly? I didn't even get the point of that. Apparently, I don't know if that was. I heard something about doing away with gender. Or there's this idea that, like in STEM, that maybe that's what they were going for. There's this idea that it should be 50-50, which I don't agree with that. If women don't want to pursue a job in the STEM field, then I don't see any reason why they should. Like I said, I work for a pool installation company. All the installers are men. If a woman doesn't want to do that, I don't think that she should want to do that. I don't see any reason why the pool installer should be 50-50 male-female. I don't see any reason for it. So I'm not sure what that was all about. I didn't quite catch that. But I'm not going to go back and watch it again because I really don't feel like it's that important.
But I have to say thank you so much, Ben, for all of your support over the years. I mean, you would retweet some of my columns for Playboy, so I really appreciate that. I still call myself a liberal, and I think it's really sad because these issues that I'm writing about are not partisan issues, especially when we talk about gender transition in children, which I don't think is appropriate because the research does not back that as the best way forward for these kids. This has become so polarized, and I'm thinking at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're on the left or the right. If these children are making decisions that are not going to be beneficial to them and their health, that's really what we should be talking about. So it's very strange for me because I see many people who would have been my allies, so-called allies, maybe even 5 years ago. They really do not care for what I have to say and in fact consider me to be a threat. And so I think that has woken me up quite a bit in terms of seeing what the left has become. But again, I still feel at the core I do have liberal principles, so that's why I still hang on to that label.
The book is The End of Gender, Debunking the Myths About Sex and Identity in Our Society. It's a really important read. Go check it out right now. Dr. So, really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Ben. Take care.
All right. So that was not... That was kind of questionable as to whether that was worthwhile or not. Like, I'm a little bit like, why did they even take the time to make that? I kind of felt like that was a little bit, from their perspective, like what was the point of that? I didn't hear really anything new there. I didn't hear anything that, when I say I mean new, like I haven't. What was there that she had to say that Ben Shapiro himself has not said already, or even people like him? I think I'll upload this anyways. Just for whatever. Maybe it'll do some good. I don't know. I didn't feel like one of the things I didn't really like what that was. I didn't really feel like it was very thorough. I feel like there were just things that were not explained. Like when she was talking about the whole thing of gender not being a social construct. I'm like, well, what aspect of gender are you talking about? Are you talking about the aspect of gender that is tied to language, where liberty is considered feminine? What are you talking about? I am still curious. In Latin, the word for poet is considered a feminine noun. I'm wondering how many women in ancient Rome were poets compared to how many men in Rome were poets. Is poetry considered poet? The word poet is feminine. Sorry, not poetry, but I don't know what the word for poetry is in Latin. It was one of the first words I learned in Latin class. Poetas. Poeta is the Latin word for poet. It is a feminine noun, and I'm wondering what the men who wrote poems thought about that. Were they all just gay? I mean, Shakespeare himself is a little bit effeminate. Walt Whitman was a little bit effeminate. He liked to wear women's clothing. He had sex with men and that sort of thing. He had sex with women too, or at least he wrote about it. And that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. If you're going to say gender is not socially constructed, you have a whole arena full of socially constructed gender. What would you call that? Associations, maybe might be the best way to put it. Like I said, that English used to be a gendered language early in its history before the Viking invasion. How is that not a social construct? Yeah. I have to go to the bathroom, so I'm just going to stop right there. Toodles.